The church bells tolled, but they couldn't drown out the shattering of Ethan Caldwell's heart. He stood frozen in the sacristy, his tuxedo crisp but his world unraveling, as he watched his fiancée, Lila, pressed against a groomsman in a stolen kiss that wasn't meant for him. 3 hours before their vows, the betrayal cut deeper than any knife could. Ethan, 28, a software engineer with a quiet charm and hazel eyes that held a universe of trust, had spent 2 years building a life with Lila. They'd met at a Seattle coffee shop, her laughter bright against the gray drizzle, and he'd fallen for her wildfire spirit. Now that fire was burning him alive. He stumbled back, the polished oak door creaking under his weight, and fled the church, the weight of 200 guests' expectations chasing him into the summer air. Outside, the Puget Sound sparkled under a rare cloudless sky, mocking his turmoil. Ethan's polished shoes hit the pavement hard as he wandered toward Pike Place Market, the hum of tourists and street musicians blurring into white noise. He needed air, space, anything to stop the reel of Lila's lips on someone else's. His phone buzzed. Texts from his best man, Marcus, asking where he'd gone, but he silenced it. The wedding was a stage and he couldn't play the fool. He found himself at a small rooftop bar overlooking the market, a place he and Lila had never visited. The bartender, a woman with a sleeve of tattoos and a kind smile, slid him a whiskey without asking. "Looks like you need it," she said. Ethan nodded, the burn of the drink grounding him. He was staring at the amber liquid when a voice broke through. "Rough day." The man sat 2 stools down, his tone light but his eyes sharp, like he could see through Ethan's carefully constructed walls. He was about Ethan's age, with tousled blonde hair and a navy blazer that hugged his lean frame. His name, Ethan would learn, was Julian Harper, Lila's older brother. Julian, 30, was a graphic designer with a knack for reading people. Openly gay, he'd always been the black sheep in their conservative family, his wit and warmth a quiet rebellion against their judgment. He'd flown in from Portland for the wedding, though he and Lila weren't close. Their parents' disapproval of his lifestyle had driven a wedge between the siblings, but Julian showed up anyway, hoping to mend something unspoken. "I just saw something I can't unsee," Ethan muttered, swirling his drink. He didn't know why he answered. Maybe it was Julian's easy posture or the way his blue eyes held no pity, only curiosity. "Want to talk about it?" Julian asked, leaning closer. His voice was steady, like a lifeline thrown into Ethan's storm. Ethan hesitated, then let it spill. The church, the kiss, the way Lila's laugh had echoed in his ears as she betrayed him. Julian listened, his face softening with every word. When Ethan finished, Julian didn't offer cliches or empty comfort. Instead, he said, "You deserve better than someone who'd break you like that." The words landed like a punch Ethan didn't know he needed. He looked at Julian, really looked, and saw something raw and real. A man who'd fought his own battles and still carried light in his smile. They talked for hours, the rooftop fading into a blur of city lights and shared stories. Julian spoke of his art, his dreams, the family that pushed him away. Ethan shared his quiet life, his love for coding, his fear of starting over. The whiskey loosened their tongues, but the connection felt deeper, unforced. As the night grew late, Julian reached for his glass, his fingers brushing Ethan's. The touch was fleeting but electric, sending a jolt through Ethan's chest. He pulled back, confused, his heart a tangle of grief and something new. Julian's eyes flickered with apology, but also something else, hope, maybe, or recognition. "I should go," Ethan said, standing abruptly. The wedding was tomorrow? Or was it today? Time felt warped. Thanks for this. Julian nodded, slipping him a napkin with his number scrawled in Sharpie. If you need to talk, I'm here. No strings. Ethan walked back to his hotel, the napkin burning a hole in his pocket. He didn't call off the wedding. Not yet. But as he lay awake, staring at the ceiling, Julian's voice echoed louder than Lila's betrayal. He didn't understand it, but something had shifted, and there was no going back. The next morning, Ethan stood at the altar, his jaw tight, as Lila walked down the aisle in a dress that once made his heart race. The guests smiled, oblivious, but Ethan's eyes kept drifting to the third row, where Julian sat, his expression unreadable. When the priest asked if anyone objected, Ethan's heart pounded. He didn't speak. He couldn't. But his silence wasn't agreement. It was a question he wasn't ready to answer. The reception hall glittered with string lights and champagne flutes, but Ethan felt like he was drowning in the charade. Lila's hand rested on his arm, her smile polished for the crowd, but every touch felt like a lie. He played his part, smiling for photos, cutting the cake, but his mind was on the napkin in his pocket, Julian's number, a quiet rebellion against the life he was supposed to want. Julian hadn't stayed long at the reception. Ethan had caught his eye across the room, a fleeting moment where Julian's gaze held something unspoken. Regret, maybe, or a warning. Then he was gone, slipping out before the first dance. Ethan wanted to follow, but the weight of 200 pairs of eyes kept him rooted. He was married now, bound to a woman he couldn't trust, and the realization clawed at him. That night, in their honeymoon suite overlooking Elliott Bay, Lila was all charm, her laughter bubbling as she recounted the day. You were so nervous at the altar, she teased, oblivious to the storm in Ethan's chest. He couldn't bring himself to confront her. Not yet. The words stuck in his throat, tangled with doubt and the memory of Julian's steady voice. The next day, they flew to Maui for their honeymoon, a trip Ethan had planned with care. The island was paradise. Turquoise waves, swaying palms, but it felt like a stage for a play he no longer believed in. Lila posted perfect photos online, her captions glowing with newlywed bliss, while Ethan withdrew, his silence growing heavier. On their third night, as Lila slept, Ethan slipped onto the balcony and called Julian. I don't know why I'm doing this, Ethan said when Julian picked up, his voice low against the ocean's hum. I just needed to hear you. Julian's laugh was soft, warm. I'm glad you called. How's paradise? It's not, Ethan admitted. It's a lie. He told Julian about the wedding, the weight of his vows, the way Lila's touch felt like betrayal even now. Julian listened, his silence a safe harbor. Then he said, You don't have to stay in a life that doesn't fit you, Ethan. You're allowed to choose yourself. The words cracked something open in Ethan. He hung up, his heart racing, and stared at the stars. For the first time, he let himself imagine a different life, one where he wasn't tethered to Lila's betrayal, where Julian's smile was more than a fleeting moment. When they returned to Seattle, Ethan confronted Lila. It was messy, raw, in their shared apartment surrounded by unpacked wedding gifts. I saw you, he said, his voice steady despite the ache. In the church. With him. Lila's face crumpled, her excuses spilling out. Stress, nerves, a mistake. But Ethan was done. He packed a bag and left, the door slamming shut on 2 years of his life. He crashed at Marcus's place, a small condo in Capitol Hill. Marcus, 29, a boisterous lawyer with a heart of gold, didn't pry but offered beer and bad action movies to dull the pain. Ethan didn't tell him about Julian. Not yet. The feelings were too new, too confusing. He'd never questioned his sexuality before, but Julian's laugh, his touch, had stirred something undeniable. A week later, Ethan met Julian at a quiet cafe in Fremont. Julian wore a gray sweater, his hair catching the afternoon light, and Ethan felt his breath catch. They talked about everything but the wedding, art, music, the way Seattle's rain felt like a promise. When Julian's hand brushed his again, Ethan didn't pull away. The touch lingered, a question and an answer all at once. "I've never done this," Ethan said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I don't know what I'm feeling." Julian's smile was soft, patient. "You don't have to know yet. Just let yourself feel it." That night, Ethan lay awake, replaying the moment. He was terrified, exhilarated, alive in a way he hadn't been in years. Lila's betrayal had broken him, but Julian was showing him a path to something new. A love he never expected. One that demanded courage he wasn't sure he had. Ethan's life became a tightrope walk between fear and freedom. He moved into a small studio in Ballard, a space filled with secondhand furniture and the quiet hum of possibility. His days were spent coding, his nights haunted by thoughts of Julian. They texted constantly. Silly memes, late-night confessions, dreams neither had dared speak aloud before. But Ethan hadn't told anyone about Julian, not even Marcus. The truth felt too fragile, too raw. Julian invited Ethan to Portland for a weekend, a chance to escape Seattle's ghosts. Ethan hesitated, then booked a bus ticket. The drive was a blur of evergreen forests and nervous anticipation. When he stepped off the bus, Julian was there, leaning against a vintage bike, his smile brighter than the Oregon sun. "You made it," Julian said, pulling Ethan into a hug that felt like home. They spent the day wandering Portland's eclectic streets. Powell's books, food carts, a quiet park where Julian sketched while Ethan watched, mesmerized by the way his hands moved. At night, they ended up at a dive bar with live jazz, the music wrapping around them like a secret. Julian talked about his art, his struggle to be seen in a world that often looked away. Ethan shared his fear of starting over, of loving someone new, someone who challenged everything he thought he knew about himself. When Julian kissed him, it was soft, tentative, under a string of fairy lights outside the bar. Ethan froze, then melted into it, his heart pounding with a truth he couldn't deny. "Is this okay?" Julian whispered, his breath warm against Ethan's cheek. "Yes," Ethan said, and meant it. The kiss was a spark, igniting something he'd buried under years of expectation. But it also terrified him. He wasn't sure what out even meant for him. He'd spent his life fitting into boxes. Good son, good husband, good man. Julian was asking him to break them all. Back in Seattle, Ethan wrestled with his feelings. He told Marcus, expecting judgment, but Marcus just grinned. "Dude, you're glowing. Whoever this guy is, he's got you lit up." The support steadied Ethan, but doubts lingered. What would his family think? His co-workers? And what about Lila, who still texted him, begging for forgiveness? Lila's family was another storm. Julian had warned Ethan about their conservative streak, their refusal to accept him. When Ethan and Julian were spotted together at a Seattle art gallery, word got back to Lila's parents. They called Ethan, their voices cold, accusing him of corrupting their son. The words stung, but Julian's hand in his, steady and warm, kept him grounded. One night, over takeout in Ethan's studio, Julian opened up about his past. a string of relationships that crumbled under his family's pressure, the loneliness of being the wrong kind of son. Ethan listened, his heart aching for the man who'd become his anchor. "I don't want to hide you," Ethan said, the words surprising even himself. "I'm scared, but I want this us." Julian's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "Then we'll figure it out together." But the world wasn't done testing them. Lila showed up at Ethan's apartment, her face streaked with tears, claiming she'd changed. "I made a mistake," she pleaded. "We can fix this." Ethan looked at her, the woman he'd once loved, and felt only pity. "I'm not the man you married," he said, closing the door. Ethan and Julian's relationship bloomed in stolen moments. Morning coffee runs, late-night walks along Alki Beach, quiet evenings where Julian sketched and Ethan coded, their worlds intertwining. But the shadow of Lila's family loomed. At a family dinner Ethan was guilted into attending, Lila's father, Richard, cornered him. "You're throwing away a good woman for what? A phase?" His words dripped with disdain, and Ethan's silence felt like cowardice. Julian, too, faced pressure. His mother called, her voice laced with guilt, urging him to stop confusing Ethan. Julian hung up, but the hurt lingered. He didn't tell Ethan everything, not wanting to burden him, but Ethan saw the strain in his eyes. "We're stronger than their words," Ethan told him, pulling him close. Julian nodded, but the doubt in his expression lingered. Work became Ethan's escape. His tech startup was launching a new app, and the long hours kept his mind busy. But one evening, as he presented at a conference in San Francisco, he saw Julian in the audience, a surprise visit. Julian had driven down, his sketchbook tucked under his arm, just to be there. After the talk, they walked the Embarcadero, the bay sparkling under the stars. "I'm proud of you," Julian said, and Ethan felt a warmth he hadn't known he needed. Their first fight came unexpectedly. Ethan, still navigating his identity, pulled back when Julian suggested going to a pride event. "I'm not ready," Ethan snapped, fear masquerading as anger. Julian's face fell, and he left without a word. For 2 days they didn't speak, the silence louder than any argument. Ethan realized how much he'd hurt Julian, how his fear had built a wall between them. He showed up at Julian's hotel. He'd been staying in Seattle for a freelance project, with a sketchpad he'd bought, a clumsy apology. "I'm scared, but I don't want to lose you," he said. Julian forgave him, but the rift showed them both how fragile this was. They needed to be all in or it wouldn't work. Ethan took a step forward, telling his parents about Julian. His mom was quiet, his dad skeptical, but they didn't shut him out. It was a start. Meanwhile, Lila's campaign to win Ethan back intensified. She sent letters, showed up at his office, even cornered Julian at a cafe, accusing him of stealing Ethan. Julian held his ground, but the encounter shook him. "She's not over you," he told Ethan, his voice tight, "and I don't know if you're over her." Ethan's heart sank. He hadn't realized how much Lila's presence still haunted them. That night, he wrote Lila a final letter, clear and firm, ending all contact. He mailed it, feeling a weight lift. Then he took Julian to the rooftop bar where they'd first met, the city sprawling below. "I choose you," Ethan said, his voice steady. "I'm all in." Julian's smile was brighter than the skyline. They kissed, the world fading away, and for the first time, Ethan felt free. A year later, Ethan and Julian stood on a cliffside in Olympic National Park, the Pacific Ocean crashing below. Ethan, now 29, had grown into his truth, his hazel eyes brighter, his heart steadier. Julian, 31, wore his usual navy blazer, his blonde hair catching the wind. They weren't perfect. Fights over small things, fears that lingered, but they were real, their love forged in courage and choice. Ethan's divorce was finalized months ago, a quiet relief. Lila had moved to Chicago, her apologies fading into silence. Ethan's family was warming to Julian, his mom even asking for one of Julian's sketches to hang in her home. Julian's family was harder, their acceptance a slow thaw, but Julian didn't need their approval anymore. He had Ethan, and that was enough. They'd built a life together. Julian moved to Seattle, his art gaining traction in local galleries, while Ethan's startup thrived. They shared a loft in Pioneer Square, filled with Julian's canvases and Ethan's tech gadgets, a space that felt like theirs. But the real work was in the quiet moments, learning each other's flaws, choosing each other every day. That day on the cliff, Julian pulled out a small ring, simple and silver, and Ethan's breath caught. "I don't need a wedding," Julian said, his voice steady but his eyes nervous. "I just need you. Will you stay with me?" Ethan laughed, tears blurring his vision. "I'm not going anywhere." He slipped on the ring, and they kissed, the ocean roaring its approval. It wasn't a marriage, not yet, but it was a promise. A vow stronger than the one Ethan had made in a church that felt like a lifetime ago. They returned to Seattle, hand in hand, ready for whatever came next. The city stretched before them, a canvas of possibility. Ethan thought of the rooftop where it all began, the napkin with Julian's number, the moment he chose to feel instead of run. Lila's betrayal had broken him, but it had also led him here, to a love that was messy, real, and worth every risk. Their story wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was theirs.